this video, I'm fishing with a camera 600 feet deep in the middle of a storm, and what we saw down there was unbelievable. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. We start our morning heading out of Boca Raton Inlet. Once we get out of the inlet, we make a 4-mile run offshore to one of our go-to fishing spots. Once we got to the spot, we started setting up our deep drop rig. So the first thing we do is rig up the most important piece, and that's the underwater camera. Once the camera was all set, we then add on our deep drop lights. And today we were using these bigger lights just because we were dealing with dark, cloudy weather. Once that was all set, we cut up some squid and then attached them to our deep drop rig. Once everything was all done, we add on a 4-pound weight and then position the boat right over our spot. Now it's time to drop the rig in the water. So we switch over to the underwater camera point of view and start making our way down 600 feet deep. And this right here is the longest part about deep dropping. It usually takes 2 to 3 minutes just to hit bottom. And on the way up, depending on what you catch, it can take you 5 to 10 minutes easily. So as we continue to make our way down to the bottom, you guys are going to notice the camera was a little more blurry today. And that's because the weather was rainy and overcast. But we're now about 20 seconds off the bottom, and on the next drop, we caught the best eating fish you can catch deep dropping. And what we saw when we were bringing this fish up was unreal, so stay tuned. We have now just hit bottom, and as you guys can see, it is pitch black down here. So we waited a couple of seconds, then the first fish showed up, and this was a tilefish, not necessarily what we were looking for today. And when you're doing this kind of fishing, the spot is everything. And to find these fishing spots, it takes a lot of time and effort. So this tilefish swam right up to the camera, and today we were searching for one of the more prized bottom fish, and that's the snowy grouper. But when you're targeting those grouper, you're going to find a lot of these tilefish. So this fish continued to try to rob my squid, and that's why it's so important to use squid. It stays on the hooks so well. So we patiently continued waiting, and it went quiet for a couple of seconds. And let us know in the comments below where you guys would want to see us drop the underwater camera next, because our goal is to keep exploring what the ocean has to offer. So that fish ended up hitting our squid, and sadly when I brought him up a little, he came right off the hook. So I dropped the rig back down to the bottom, and the second we hit bottom, this tilefish came right back to the rig. And that's a nice sized tilefish. And you really need to be patient to catch these fish. If you try to horse them off the bottom, it usually never works out. But at this point, we were about 5 minutes into this drop, and it was pouring rain. So we decided to give this drop a final minute before deciding to move on to our next spot. And at the next spot, you won't believe what we saw on camera, so stay tuned. It now went dead down here for a couple of seconds. And at this point, drop number 1 wasn't looking good. But we patiently waited it out, and then this tilefish came back around. And we thought we had him here, so I started bringing up the rig, and sadly, he came right off the hook. So drop number 1 was a fail. Now we're on to drop number 2. So we started bringing the rig up now, and this is a part that usually takes a long time, but luckily today, since we were only fishing 600 feet deep, it only took us about 2 minutes. So once we got the rig back to the boat, as you guys can see, it was pouring rain. But we repositioned the boat on another grouper spot we had, and hopefully drop number 2 brings us some more luck. So we reset the deep drop rig, and then we made our way down 600 feet deep. So we switched back over to the underwater camera point of view. And honestly, on this drop, we saw one of the craziest fish frenzies I have ever seen with the underwater camera. So we are now a couple seconds off the bottom, and this spot we were fishing was in about 580 feet of water. So we have just hit bottom, and the second we hit bottom, there were already 2 tilefish on our baits. So one of these tilefish ended up hitting our bottom squid, and when you're fishing this deep, it's really hard to tell when a fish is on your bait. So I brought up the baits thinking I had a tilefish, and sadly there was nothing on. So I dropped the baits back down to the bottom, and again, the second I hit bottom, the tilefish were back on my baits. So now there was 3 fish on my baits, and at this point, I was getting kind of annoyed that we couldn't hook one. But we patiently continued waiting, and this by far is the most fish I've ever seen with the underwater camera. I fished this spot multiple times with the camera and have never seen this many fish on my baits. So I repositioned the baits one last time, and this time around, there were 5 tilefish on our baits, and if you guys look on the very bottom, there is a grouper, and somehow with our luck, we ended up hooking that grouper. So the second I felt that grouper on our bait, I started bringing it up as fast as possible, and this time around, we were able to hook it. But the craziest thing happened when we were bringing this grouper up. So as we brought him up, if you guys look right under this grouper, and this is the first time this has ever happened to us, there was a giant hammerhead shark, and sadly he didn't attack the grouper. And this by far is one of the coolest things we have seen with this underwater camera. So right there you guys can see that hammerhead shark, and that thing is a giant, and he was lurking right under our boat. And if you guys get this video to 500 likes, we're gonna drop the underwater camera on a shark infested reef. So we now had this fish right under the boat, and we were successfully able to land this beautiful snowy grouper. So once we got this fish in the boat, we took a couple pictures with it, and after battling storms all day, we decided to call it a day. We hope you guys enjoyed this underwater fishing video, and we'll see you in the next Barjack's Family Fishing video.